Perfect. We're live again on LinkedIn, on Facebook, and on YouTube. Today, before we get in, my name is Chris Jolly, aka the Freight Coach, and we're here to talk about Port-Pocalypse. Everything that's going on in the ports right now. There's a lot of information being put out there, but it's lacking substance, and I'm very clear on my stance on this with everybody who I bring on and letting them know, because we need solutions at this point. And I've watched a lot of interviews, I've watched a lot of things, I've been reading a lot of articles, and it's just lacking that accountability piece to me of what are we going to do to fix this, to not let this happen again. If you're out here on LinkedIn Live or Facebook Live or anything like that, and you're dropping comments in, we will get to them. Any answers at the end, we'll save about 15 minutes of this. But again, we're here to talk about solutions. The audio-only version of this will be available on my podcast later on, Coffee with the Freight Coach. It's available on iTunes and Spotify. I got a very special guest for you guys here today. I'm just going to introduce him as Mason George, and let him kind of talk about what his company does and what they have right now to kind of navigate through this. So Mason, thank you for joining me today.
Well, Chris, thanks for having me, and appreciate everything you guys are doing on bringing light to the issues that we have, right? So the supply chain has been all over the news. My colleagues and I have been talking. No one can remember any other president sitting or past whatever talking about supply chain issues in this specific marine drayage industry and the terminals and rails like Joe Biden did. So, I mean, this is just a really hot time, I think, for the whole segment, which is fun to have this platform to talk about what we want to do as a company. But anyway, IMC Companies is the largest marine drayage carrier in the country. We pick up more containers every day that are marine based than anybody else. And we have over 2,200 trucks all over the country and about 48 terminals. We are everywhere, from LA to Newark and Savannah to Memphis and Chicago. We do the rails and ocean ports and all the above.
So when we're talking marine base, so like I always like to break this down, because again, I feel like they're throwing a lot of acronyms out there for our industry, but like people hear it and they're like, what's an SSL, or what's a what's a forward, or what do any of these people do? So it's like, when we're talking marine, you're out there and you're organizing the transportation from the port out to your guys' facilities, correct? And then from there, do you guys bring it into, like, get transloaded and then sent out into the middle mile and final mile portion of that onto like the over the road trucks?
Well, so we do think about it this in a pure just sealed container method, right? So we pick up a container from a port or rail, and then we dray it or truck it from that port to wherever our customer needs it. It could be a transload facility, or it could be their distribution center directly, or it could be across the country, at a customer's distribution center for one of their customers. So it's a methodology of delivering containers seal intact wherever that individual or entity needs it to go. And we don't transload any cargo. That's a very, very small business that we have. It's probably 5% of our total net revenue is actually transloading. And we also don't do anything in 53-foot vans or containers. It's all 40-foot, 45-foot, and 20-foot.
Okay. So what's I guess let's bring it back. What got us to today? Because I think a lot of us who've been in the industry, we've been seeing this. And I think one of my biggest things right now, Mason, is it's like, how are the people who are in the positions to kind of like crisis aversion, essentially, how was this not brought up when there was, like, say 20 ships? And like, all right, because like the beauty of ocean freight, everyone, is it's not like these things pop up out of thin air. Like, this is a literal, like, a 3-week notification or a 4-week notification between when it leaves the port in Asia to when it gets stateside. So like, none of this would have been news. And it's like, why wasn't the alarm, like the red flag, raised at 20 ships or heck, even 40?
Whoa. So several items, right?
Yeah.
One is that our entire industry is horrifically bad at forecasting. You can get it from customers. You can't get it from trucking companies. You can't get it pretty much from our own drivers that say, hey, when can you forecast that you want another day off? They'll kick that off, I don't know, I'll tell you tomorrow kind of thing. So there's a whole just industry problem when you talk about that, when it builds up. But I think your earlier question on how we got here, it's been, I think, pretty well accepted that due to the COVID surge, the COVID boom that we're in right now, people couldn't travel, people couldn't do their experience and spend all their money out there at a concert or going out to eat or their entertainment per se. They started buying goods and services, and basically nothing is manufactured in the U.S. to any substance anymore, right?
Yeah.
So everything is outsourced, made in Asia for the most part, and there's exceptions to all this stuff, but it's made in Asia. We consume it, and it's put on a container, and it's brought to the U.S. And really, we saw just a huge spike in consumer spending because of the federal subsidies, the protective payroll programs, as well as even the unemployment and stimulus checks that everybody got. So you can't do anything with this money. Well, let's get on Amazon and buy some stuff, right? And that's what caused the big surge in containers. So if you look at it from a year over year, you combine the LA and Long Beach ports together, it's about 1.8 million more TEUs in 2021 versus 2020. And that's just year to date, by the way, January to October. That's what caused this huge surge in volume.
So I guess, you hear it now, like, obviously Ron DeSantis in Florida is like, hey, send your ships to Florida. Why? But, it's like, I want to talk about that because, again, like when mainstream media gets in and starts throwing these things out there, then I think a lot of people are like, well, yeah, why can't you just do something like that? So can you kind of touch on that? Like, knowing of the potential bottleneck that was at play already, why wasn't an executive decision made? Like, hey, we got Seattle, Oakland, San Francisco, and San Diego all on the West Coast. Why don't we reroute prior to having it leave dock in Asia?
I love Ron DeSantis holding his hand up in the air trying to help. I mean, I think that's badly needed. And that's a guy that I could relate to try to, they're trying to help anything. The problem is when you look at, the Port of Miami and the Everglades out there, they don't have the infrastructure to handle more than one of these big major vessels.
Yeah.
Right. So if you sent 4 of those over there, it would just cripple that entire port system. They don't have the rail infrastructure that's in LA, Oakland, or Seattle. So, I mean, it would be an unmitigated disaster, probably way worse than it would be in LA. So, and then your other point, why don't we just disperse this stuff, right? There's a lot of the Shipping Act of 1984, prevents a lot of this flexibility just to say, hey, I'm going to put a whole boat that was originally destined for LA. We're going to send it all the way up to Oakland, right? Because that boat has several things that, number one, it's got customs clearances that are destined for LA. So all the bill of ladings would have to be changed. The other thing is there's a lot of LA freight that is local that needs to be sent there, broken down at a distribution or a transload location and sent out different methods, whether that's LTL or FTL, all those different ways to get product throughout the country. And then the other thing is if you were even to try to divert that stuff, say, let's go get that LA destined cargo and bring it to just Long Beach. You imagine how many drivers that would suck out of the system, right? You would have to send, thousands of drivers out of the LA area all the way up to Oakland and Seattle just to get that cargo back. So it's as much as I sympathize with you of like, why do we keep doing this stuff to LA? There's got to be another way. LA is Rome. It is 12 days from Asia, coast to coast to LA. It gets on the train, 3 days to Chicago, 4 days to Memphis. It is a fine oiled machine when it comes to putting a lot of cargo through there. But the problem that we have today is we spiked that cargo, right? So now we were at, I think it was like 7.4 million, and now we're looking at 9 million. I mean, it's a ton. That's a ton of volume, right? Yeah. And the infrastructure is just not built for that right now. And what happens is we have the snowball effect, right? So there's cargo that's been there for a while that can't get out, and we keep bringing in more cargo, and we're almost at like a packed nightclub where you got to go one in, one out kind of facade. Yeah, it's pretty tough.
No, definitely. So this kind of brings me into what we had initially been conversing about before we kind of jumped on all of this stuff, because again, it's like, I think drastic times call for drastic measures. And like what, again, like I had brought up in my continued issue with everything is it is the finger pointing. And I get it. Everybody doesn't want to but somebody eventually has to fall on a sword. Somebody eventually has to do it because again, it's at the expense of the American public. It's at the expense of the small to mid-sized companies out there whose literal everything is waiting on that ship right now. And like the potential catastrophe that is awaiting a lot of companies, I think, is not put into proper context. And this is what I mean by it's somebody's just got to be like, all right, we have to think outside of the box. Like if it's a short-term environmental change, because there are some environmental laws out there. I understand all of that, but again, it's like, what type of window can we do to kind of roll this through? Because again, when we're explaining, if a driver comes in, and I want you to kind of walk us through, like the appeal process and everything here, and then we'll circle back to what I had just brought up. But I want to talk about that, to kind of expedite the offloading process in that regard. So let's talk about the appeal process and how that kind of is different than what is currently going down. And if you could walk people through the current model and then how the appeal process is different.
Yeah. So, about 5 years ago, terminals started to adopt an appointment-based system, right? That said, look, we've got so much cargo on site, and it's really inefficient for us to try to make everything available at all times. So instead of your driver going to the gate to say, hey, I'm here to pick up APZU 4571237, and then he would go wait by the stacks, and then a crane operator would finally see him, and they dig through the boxes and find their box. The terminals started implementing an appointment system that essentially says, hey, IMC, you tell us when you guys are going to be here, and we'll make sure we have a crane available and ready on site to load your truck, right? So instead of you guys having to wave us down and us dig and not have a crane on site at that time, we'll tell you, we'll try to coordinate a little better with this. Well, the issue then becomes, now you have all of these appointments here that every container that you try to pick up now has to have an appointment, right?
Yeah.
And that, I don't know if that really helped anything in the dray community, because it just essentially made less cargo available for us to pick up, right? So now we're picking up containers out of the terminals and trying to deliver them to the customer, not necessarily when the customer wants them, but when the terminal wants to load those things, right? And then we got to make sure we have a truck that shows up on time to pick something up, and we can leave with the box and make it to the customer. Well, then you add another layer of complexity that says, hey, look, you have 2,000 8 a.m. appointments, right?
Yeah.
And now 2,000 truckers are trying to get into the terminal all at the same time at 8 o'clock to pick up this thing, right? So that appointment system was a huge change to the LA market, and it's just it's never really truly been perfected. And then what happened is that everybody got smart and said, look, we're going to start getting appointments for empties too, right? Mm-hmm. And it says, all right, I'm going to only allow 400 CMA empty slots to be booked at a certain time. So you go on and you try to book an appointment for your empty. Well, the other complexity when you get to a specific container number is now you got to plan an empty dray with a specific container to match up with an import load at a certain time too. So imagine trying to get an 8 a.m. appointment for a 10 a.m. pickup, right? I mean, that's all this coordination that all these trucking companies are having to do. And by the way, LA is made up of a whole bunch of smaller carriers who are good entrepreneurs who are doing their thing, but that's a lot of bureaucracy to push down on them, right? I mean, just think about that. What if you had to make 2 appointments for every container you're trying to pick up, make sure that your driver was not only going to be showing up on time to pick up your empty from your DC, but also make it on time to get into that terminal to pick it up, right? So what happens? You get to this scenario where you're using only a small portion of all the appointments that are available to the trucking community, right? Because what happens, these smaller guys and even the big guys too, overbook appointments, right? Yeah. So, hey, I've got 10 trucks going into the port today. I'm going to book 30 appointments. So, because I don't know really what time my guy's going to get there. And I might change what that guy picks up while he's in line so he doesn't miss his first appointment, right? Mm-hmm. Which is why we have all these dry runs too. So essentially what we have done is there was another process that kind of went along with this as well, which was called the peel pile process. And the peel pile is if you have a customer that is big enough, that has enough block stowage on a vessel, we'll take those boxes from the vessel, put them on terminal together, And as long as you don't ask for a specific container, you can come pick it up between the hours of 8 to 5. And if you can get them all out, you can have them that way, right? And what that kind of led to was, well, as long as all 100 of these containers are on the same boat, stacked together, and can be delivered, and we can give all the drivers know that they're picking up container X, delivering it to the same destination Y, right? And I'm getting real technical here, so I apologize. But that was kind of the birth of the peel pile, was as long as I got 100 containers picking up from the same place, going to the same place, then I'll go knock that out. So then, coincidentally, as the peel pile is working, this appointment system just continues to degrade, right? We book an 8 a.m. appointment. We show up at 9 o'clock because there was an hour-long line. They kick us out. Sorry, can't take that box. Give me something else. And our peel pile drivers are having a lot of success because they have this whole old open window of I can pick up anytime between 8 and 4 o'clock. And then we'll come back, take a break, and do it another time between 5 and 2 a.m. in the morning. So what we decided to do as just a company is say, how can we start to eliminate some of these barriers to allow us to do more peels, right? So one would be, well, let's get rid of the block stowage thing. How do we get rid of the block stowage thing? Well, let's make a peel pile as big as we possibly can. Instead of trying to do 20 together and have 2 or 3 different piles made of only 20 containers, let's combine them all. Let's make a pile of 60 and then add another 10 that weren't really block stowed. And now we got a peel pile of 70. That allows us to get more density in our piles. But now we got to get smart, because guess what? Instead of having 3 piles that had 20 different, one destination piles, we've got 70 containers that are in this one pile that all is going everywhere. So we had to develop an app. So we got an app now called Power Direct. You can go download that thing, and it tells our drivers when they are assigned a container for what's picked up. It tells them exactly where to go. And we can change that all the way up until the guy's loaded up with the container, whether he's taking it directly to the DC or it's getting diverted to a yard for a pre-pull and hold, or we're taking it, quite frankly, across the country. We might not send that guy across the country with it, but we can change anything kind of live there. And that eliminated the need to say, I'm going to give my drivers this big list of cargo and it's only going to one place. So we made it a little bit more dynamic by adding the customers to the pile, as well as being flexible with where these guys are going at the end of the day.
So because obviously there's a lot of independent contractors that are out there in the drayage world. There's a ton of independent contractors. How does an independent contractor work with somebody like you to get access to that peel freight? Because I feel like, again, I know desperate times kind of call for desperate measures, but like what you're explaining right there is like, when it comes down to like breaking it up by a retailer, if there's the volume there, and I know like obviously not every single container that comes through is at volume, but it's like what number could there be at the port? Where is it 10 containers or more? Is it 20? How does that look? So like the independent contractors can take advantage of this to kind of expedite that process.
Yeah, it's very terminal specific, right? So the port's going to say, I need more than, 20 at this place, but another terminal might be tougher and say, I got to have 100 minimum, right? So it really varies, from the low end, probably about 30 or 40 containers, and on the top end, they'll do it as they'll do a pile as big as you can. But some of these guys like APM, they have to have 100, right? And some of these guys aren't as flexible as others, right? So what I would tell you, for an independent contractor, what we would want, the model we would want, is to collaborate with those guys, right? And we do that every day. We have 500 vendors that we work with all over the country, right? Yeah. And I'd take another 2,000 of those guys today if they would want to work this process. Because I'll tell you what's beautiful about it is they might have a hard time stacking up their own peel pile on site with TTI. But what I want them to do is potentially bring their freight with them along with their drivers, and we can work on this together and collaborate on a bigger pile together, right? I think that's really where the opportunity is. It's great to have the peel pile process, but what would be even better is if you could do a whole terminal via a peel pile, right? And so instead of having all this appointment stuff that goes everywhere, let's put everybody on the same pile so we can distribute this cargo and get it to the hands of people who need it.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I understand the whole appointment system and everything else, but to the outside world who's not involved in trucking,
Yeah.
appointments are extremely difficult, especially if you think obviously obvious geographic locations of ports. Let's be honest, Port of LA and the Port of Long Beach, heavy traffic area. Okay, so therefore, there's a lot of different things that can go wrong in this, and then when you're held to that, again, it's like I'm not saying the Wild West, first come first serve, 24/7, show up, we'll do our thing. I understand that there has to be some sort of structure, but again, I just go back to the fact that we have to think of a different way. Like, again, it's like getting to this point can't happen again. You know what I mean? And it's not. It's not me kind of throwing shade at any administration or anything like that, but it's like collaboratively as an industry. It can't be the independent contractors. It can't be the draymen. It can't be the longshoremen. It can't, we all have to sit down and think of what is an alternative, because what you're talking about right here, I think the peel pile right now could alleviate a lot of the congestion. It could alleviate a ton of the congestion. And now, kind of like we had talked about before we had met, hey, is that the perfect long-term solution? I don't know, but it's a phenomenal short-term solution to clear up congestion. And then it's again, if we could look at the data behind it all and, the loading processes and everything else, because these fines that are starting to get assessed today, that is going to be that's going to be catastrophic in my opinion. That is not going to end well at all. I think that I'll let you answer before we go down that one. But
well, to the fines. Well, I'll hit that one first. I would 100% agree with you. I mean, you're just adding insult to punishment, right?
Correct.
I mean, if you saw the 60 Minutes deal yesterday, it was a great illustration. There's two DC guys out there, right? They own their own business. They have their own warehouse, and you look at it and they're empty. They need the cargo. It's kind of backwards to me to think that all these people imported all these goods, paid all this money to manufacture it. It's all the way to the finish line, and they're saying, "Well, I don't want that." I just don't believe that that's happening. I'm sure it's happening on some sort of a minor scale that says, "Hey, I don't want those boxes. Let's just get to them later." But for the bulk of America who's ordered stuff, there's a reason why shelves are empty, because it's freaking there. Right. Mm-hmm. So let's go get it. And in the peel pile process, why I love it so much is everybody wants to say, oh, well, we have driver shortages, right? We just don't have enough drivers to handle all this. Okay, well, man, we've been living in a driver shortage since about 2011. Okay.
Yeah, longer back. So what's funny, Mason, is my old man is, I come from a family of truck drivers. Okay. Right. I've literally been back to the 1930s. My family's been in this industry.
That's awesome.
My dad has literally told me there's been a quote unquote driver shortage since 1976 when he got out of the military and started driving as an owner operator.
That's right.
So again, here we are 40 years later, right, and there's still a driver shortage. So proceed. Sorry.
No, that's a great point. I was saying since the Great Recession, we have been hiring drivers pretty much throughout all of those things. And the issue is you can't blame the circumstance on that certain issue. Right. We've got to fix that issue. And our issue, and I think there's strong data out there to say, is that we're not going to be able to hire 1 million more drivers in the next 2 years. Right. That's just not going to happen. So what do you got to do? You got to be more efficient with what you got. Right. Let's be more resourceful. Let's cut out the unproductive lifts. Let's make our guys more efficient at these heavily congested terminals, because it's asinine for us to wait and expect our drivers to wait literally half a day to get one container on average in some places.
Yeah.
I mean, that's I think what people miss. And I'm sure everybody would be sympathetic here. People go to work to make a difference. Okay. You go to work to be fulfilled and to do a job that you feel like you're bringing value to those you work with and value to those who you're serving and all the above. And drivers feel that way. Okay. It's not just a money issue. If we could pay all of our drivers $1 million a year, I would love all of that. Don't get me wrong, but they also want to make sure that they're feeling productive, right? I remember when I was dispatching, I had a driver, started the morning, we totally screwed his day up, sent him to the wrong place 3 or 4 different times, told him, hey, I'm going to pay you for the day. I'm really sorry about that. I'll pay you for the day. He goes, man, you're missing the point. Okay. It's not about the money. It's about me feeling like I'm wasting my time all the time. And that's how these guys are doing this. It doesn't matter if you pay them hourly to sit there at the port for 8 hours a day. That's not fulfilling. They want to deliver cargo. You got to drive, you got in the truck, to get in the seat and make customers happy. That's why they want to do this. So we're doing a really poor job of that right now. And I think the peel pile process attacks that. They say, look, we're going to make it efficient. It's going to feel better. We're going to have a priority lane. We're going to get a lot of cargo moving. We're going to increase your turns from 2 to 2 per day. We're going to get it up to 4 and 5. And you're going to feel a lot better at the end of the day, like you actually accomplished something.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm right there with you. I think, again, this is of my opinion, the drivers are getting the massive short end of the stick on this one. Massive. And it's like, again, we want to sit here and say we got to recruit new drivers and we got to recruit more. How can we do that if what they have to deal with day in and day out is below average at best? And then it's like, then on top of that, they get up there, it's like they wait 6 hours just to get loaded with one container. And then it takes another 2 hours to get that one container on their chassis to get out and everything else. And it's like they get one turn in a day. And again, it's that fulfillment thing. And then, again, I've personally witnessed a lot of this, the disrespect that a lot of our drivers are shown out there. It's pathetic is what it is, Mason. And
I'd love to figure out who can wait in line for 6 hours and not have to go to the bathroom somewhere. You know what I mean? Like, I think how ridiculous that sounds. You know what I mean? So there's no provisions. I saw a video on LinkedIn the other day. A guy was ordering pizza and telling him where he was in line. The guy was running a pizza over there to him. I mean, this system's not designed for that, right? If you go out to the terminal right now, any of those LA terminals, there's not a sign that says, oh, you've got 4 hours more to wait. You've got 1 more hour to wait. Once you got here, it's another 30 minutes. Like, that's not out there. So there's no predictability for how long these guys are going to sit out there. But they know and they feel the pressure of, I'm missing my appointment, but I'm in line, so I got to wait. I'm doing my best.
No, I mean that's exactly it. And it's like, again, it's like there's just so much of, again, it's just, I don't want to sound like I'm beating a dead horse here, but it's really tough for me, Mason, to sit back and just continuously watch, because this is our industry, man. Like, this industry is everything to me. This has literally been a part of my life since I was born. And I just can't sit back and sit idle and accept everything that's being said as face value. And that's just, like that old, it is what it is thing. Like that's ridiculous to me, because it's literally costing people's livelihoods right now. And it's like, it's the end user. And again, it's the American public that is going to pay for this. And we are paying for this already, and it's only going to get worse. And again, it's like, and I know that there's no perfect solution, but we're lacking action. And that's just what is needed, because it's like, on top of this, like getting the port, getting the containers off is only part of the equation. What are we going to do with all the empties? Because I think that is the real problem that is not being discussed, is what will be coming our way in a few months when there's nothing to be loaded in Asia to be sent back in other parts of the world, not just Asia, but in other parts of the world. Because there's so it's like, the way that I see it is, it's like, they want to sit here and say, like, like Gene Soroka came out and said, oh, we're finding the ocean liners, who essentially have under the table told everybody, actually, no, they are, but we're going to pass that to you. And then it's going to be passed on to the driver and everything else. But then it's like, you sit here and you see what is being done. And then it's like, the empty containers is the biggest thing to me. It's like, we have to get rid of them. And it's almost like, if we love spending money as much as we love to do as on the government level, so, like, how many of these containers can be on one, like, large ocean vessel? How many containers can fit on that?
Oh, I mean, you're talking about from a TEU standpoint, 22,000 for the mega vessels, right? And I mean, they're only getting bigger, but yeah. Yeah.
So I think, and then and I don't know, I'm kind of putting you on the spot with this number. How many empty containers are sitting in the LA Long Beach port right now? Like that you just top ahead, if you had to guess, what would it be looking like?
I don't think anybody knows that data. Yeah. I mean, I know that there's like about 14,000 Wanhai containers that nobody can take back in, right? So those 14,000 Wanhais are taking up 14,000 empty container spots. And more than likely, most of those containers are on chassis, right? Which is just compounding the issue. But you're right, Matt, from the HTA out there, and you are saying the same thing, right? If we don't have the ability to take an empty back into the terminal, the system's broken, and it's a matter of time before it gets even worse, right? And all of these containers that are sitting out there on chassis in the LA market are just sucking up space that really should be for a load, right? And you imagine how upsetting it is for a dock in a warehouse to have a bunch of empty trailers on their yard. They don't want them on their yard, right? Because they've got to make room for their other outbound and their other inbound. So get this import empty off my yard. Well, the trucking community is burdened with that. Well, where do I take it? Right?
Yeah.
You want it off your yard, and the terminal can't take it in because they need an empty in appointment, and I can't get an empty in appointment. And they say, well, check back at 2 a.m. in the morning and see if there was any more. I mean, that's hard. That's hard to manage, right? So we make all this bureaucracy of how we're supposed to do our daily jobs. It's just unreal, unproductive, because then people just stop doing it and they throw their hands up, which is why they started parking those empty containers in the middle of the daggum street. Like, hey, dude, I'm done with them. Yeah, I'm just going to park them here, right? It's a little bit of civil disobedience at some point. But the one thing, and I'm coming back to my peel pile process solution, is that as the same idea that gets rid of the appointment system for picking up all the containers, it also applies to the empties. Okay, so if I'm picking up a peel pile FMS and I've got 500 CMA boxes I'm picking up, I can take 500 CMA empties back, right? And I don't have to have container specific appointments for that. I can just say, here's 500 empties I'm taking in. So for all the listeners out there that have empty equipment that you want to try to figure out if we can put into a peel pile, we should work together. You guys come in, bring an empty in, I'll hook you up with a load out, and it'll be a lot better process than what you've done before. I guarantee it.
And now that is at every port, or is that specific LA Long Beach right now? Is this something that's rolled out across the country?
So specifically, we are doing peel piles in LA, Chicago. We've done them in Charlotte. We're doing one in Newark today. We do them in Memphis on a weekly basis too, as well as Savannah, right? So we're doing this on a national level. Chicago and LA are really the ones getting most of the press, right? But Newark is in a horrible situation too. I mean, it's just as bad as LA. But LA Long Beach is getting most of it. And what I would say to those that specific place there, depending on the terminal, we could work with you on getting those empties back in return, because we have some really good density at a lot of the terminals. We're picking up peels almost at every terminal today. We could do more peels, don't get me wrong, but that's I think is an avenue of how we could get these empties in. And one day maybe we'll have this scaled up enough to where we could do this network wide, right? We could do it not just in a few terminals in LA. We could do it everywhere where this process is, because I truly believe, like I said earlier, it takes no more trucks to be more efficient, right? This is a way to make this happen a lot quicker.
Yeah, no, I mean, I completely understand. And I think, like, let me ask you this is kind of a curveball question for you though,
sure,
Mason. At what point does somebody say we're loading an entire super vessel with empty containers to go back and we're cleaning this up? When does it get to that point? Because to me, again, like, I mean, I understand, like, I personally understand everything you're saying. Like, to me, like, this is something, and I know we agreed, like, this is something that should have been done months ago, you know? But at what point does it get, though? Is it when there's mass shortages across, and like people aren't eating? Is that when that happens? Like, I just don't understand, because it's like, if it's gotten, no, I know, it's like, if it's gotten to this point and nothing drastic has been done, what is the real tipping point then?
So you're hitting on something. Like, what's it going to take to get 22,000 TEUs out, you know, in a big way? That is a tough one. So I would say we're close. What I think the right thing to do would be for these carriers to appeal to the UIIA and say, where in the UIIA, which is our governing body, right? This is the agreement that everybody sat down and agreed to. There are certain rules and provisions for how we're supposed to, you know, treat equipment and, you know, inspections and all the above, and who's liable for what. However, there is no provisioning, zero, for where we are today, where I have an empty container that I can't take in, right? And the terminals want to say, well, you can just do it on a dual transaction. Well, for the smaller guy, he's got 5 trucks. He might not have a dual transaction for another week, right? Because it's one of the containers that he was supposed to be picking up at SSA is still on the water out there. So what's he do? Well, you got to sit on it. That is not a provision that the UIIA has addressed, right? So one, we need to address that to give us some kind of ground rules on how we're supposed to behave with, I can't take this empty in to where I picked it up from. What do you want me to do? Right now, the steamship lines and the community and the industry are just saying, well, that's a trucker's problem. You guys got to figure that out. Well, how do we figure that out?
Yeah.
What's the answer? Okay, well, we'll stack them up on our yard. Okay, well, I still want to get them out. I still want to get done with all this stuff. Your point earlier, what would it take to get one of these big mega vessels in to keep cleaning us out until we're getting a little bit more of a stable situation? I wonder, you hear all this press and these headlines of these bigger shippers that are bringing cargo in on a charter vessel.
Yeah.
Like when that happens, what's going outbound on that charter vessel? Are we loading that with anything? Or is it just going back absolutely empty, right? So, well, good for them that they got their cargo into the ports. But the bad thing is we have another 22,000 containers, 11,000 FEUs that are sitting in LA that we don't have anything to do with, right? So we got to load that stuff back out. And maybe I'm wrong. I don't have enough of the data on what's being loaded outbound on those things. But you get my point. You're exactly right. There's nobody really leading the charge that says, I'm coming to grab this stuff, right?
Yeah. And that's exactly where it's at in my head right now. It's like, I think, 20 ships, 65, 70 ships ago is when something should have been like, all right, there is a massive problem coming. We need to implement something. And then that was kicked down the road. And I understand. But again, regardless of what has happened, we need to change today to change the future from this to not happen again. And it's like, they're sitting out here saying, oh, we're going to find. Hold them to it then. And then I guarantee it will be fixed if you hold them to it. But if they're able to kick the can down the road and essentially suffocate the driver with these fees, that's the issue to me. That is the 100% issue. Is there's no accountability with this, and that's what needs. If you can't say I'm going to fine, it's just like, hey, I'm going to give you a speeding ticket, and you're like, okay, I'm done. That's where it's at. So it's like, again, I think it's got they have to be held to it, because I guarantee if the people who had the power to clean this up wanted this cleaned up, Mason, again, this is Chris Jolly, the freight coach's opinion only, this would be fixed.
Yeah. And so if you're passing the fee on just to the shipper, right, what does that really accomplish? You should just raise your demurrage rates at that point, right? Raise the storage at the terminal to make that happen. Per diem is another idea that we haven't really talked about. I mean, there's people that are sending per diem bills out for not returning equipment, and you can't return the equipment, but you get the bill anyway, right? And what's just laughable about that is that all the burden of proof comes down on the trucker, right?
Yes.
Prove to me that you couldn't turn that empty in. Well, okay, now I'm going to have print screens of your website to say that I couldn't turn the empty in, right? I mean, what do you want me to say here, right? Then if you want a print screen for everything, don't come back to me and say, oh, well, that was at 2 a.m. Did you check at 12? Or did you check at 8 a.m. or did you check at 6 p.m.? And it's like, this is not right. At some level, I got to raise my hand up and say, we got to change this system. It's not right.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like on the 60 Minutes interview I was watching last night, they're like, oh, we're good 19 hours. It's those 5 hours out of the day, though. It's like, come on. From 3 a.m. till 8 a.m. Really? That's the window that's causing all of this, And it's like, and again, it's like what you're talking about right there. The trucker is getting held out to dry right now, and they're the ones who are taking the blame for all of this, and it is completely unwarranted. Again, I had Brian Kempsky on with PortX Logistics. He brought up a phenomenal idea to it's the palletization of all of this stuff, and how that would expedite this exponentially, I think, as well, and really cycling this through, because again, I just think bringing back up to the fact that, when my old man started driving in 1976, Mason, and all the problems we have today were the exact same back then. Okay, so that to me tells me that nothing has changed because people don't want it to change. And again, it's like where we're at today is an issue that cannot happen again.
Right. So supply chain is very slow to change. I mean, Malcolm McLean, he made the container in the 50s, right?
Yeah.
Well, the next biggest innovation that happened in the container business, which that was amazing. Box Changed the World. Read that book. It's fantastic. But the next big innovation in our industry was the stacks train, right?
Yeah.
Remember the Pacer stack train?
Yeah.
Everybody's high-fiving each other because we put two on top of each other and railed them inland. That's some pretty advanced stuff. But what we're hoping is that this peel pile way of thinking and the methodology is where the planets are aligning, right? The vessel operators want their cargo through the terminals, right? The terminals want the cargo through the terminals. The shippers want to get their stuff through the terminals, and our drivers want to get through the terminals as quickly as possible, right? So the best way to do that is to quit all this digging and take the one on the top. If you take the one on the top, that's going to save everybody a lot of heartache and grief. And in my opinion, to what you were saying earlier, if we don't start behaving this way and start looking at how we can do this at a bigger scale, then I do think that we are there's something else kind of going on here, right? There's no one really motivated for change because the people who are profiting from this don't really want to change anything. Great. Why are we upset? I made $12 billion last quarter. This is great.
Why would I work harder to make less money?
That's
right. Like that's sort of like that. So it's like to me though. Again, like what I guess I kind of want to cover for the last couple of minutes here on that infrastructure, because it's like our ports, again, comparatively speaking to say Shanghai, which has like the top ports in the world.
Right.
What do we have to do to get to that level of it? Is it a complete, I don't want to say like, let's level it and rebuild it up, but like what are some changes that we can make? Because again, what was it, like $17 billion was earmarked for the ports in this infrastructure bill. But again, how much of that is actually going to the ports on the coast and not like inland ports and, a port in the middle of Kansas or something like that?
Right. Oh man, that's okay. So I have not read the infrastructure bill, so I couldn't speak specifically to any of that. I am happy that some of that stuff got passed because it's badly needed. We need to have an infrastructure plan. A plan is definitely better than no plan. There is
yes.
So I would tell you, just from my chair, I think where we're lacking is in the terminal facilities in LA for sure. Right. I mean, there's not enough land for those guys to operate. They're very landlocked. The way that they conduct business is very, it's old school. It's not innovative. Everybody's kind of doing the same thing they've been doing for a long time. And, kudos to them because it has worked for a long time, but I think we're just outgrowing that stuff. So we have to look at it differently. And there are a lot of good actors out there, right? A lot of these guys want to do a better job, but their hands are tied for how they work with the unions potentially. Or with what capabilities the rails can bring in too, right? So, I mean, there's this rail car situation. There's less on-dock rail space because of all the other containers that are on site. There's not a lot of forecasting. There's some big problems out there in specifically LA. And it's not like you can build a railroad. Correct. Hey, let's just make another port in San Diego, right? Well, that's easier said than done. I mean, it's $1 million a mile to build a railroad. How are we going to route that thing? How's that going to look? We're in trouble when it comes to that. So what I would tell you is somebody out there in a basement might be working on an idea just to disrupt the entire container shipping industry, right? And they're going to come out with something that Malcolm McLean came back with several years ago. But I think today, to answer the question, if, even if you only had two containers stacked on top of each other, okay, and my driver comes in and he wants the one on bottom, if my guy would just take the one on top and deliver it live with a system that would help him do that, which we have all the tech today. We're doing this today. That's 50% more efficient, right? Or, you're twice as good. Okay. Your old stats class. Yeah. And then you add that up and you go to 4 high, right? And now you, instead of taking 3 down to get the one you want, you're going 1 for 1. Now you're even better. You're 75% more, right? And that's where we're headed.
Yeah. So like, I guess you kind of shout out to Brian. He's in the comments right now, because he said, what makes the SSLs, the steam shipping lines, want to change when they're making so much money? They contract with the terminal. How do we bring all the stakeholders together? The BCOs, the steamship lines, the freight forwarders, terminals, the trucking community all together. And that's what essentially is needed at this point is like, all right, we got to switch this around. But I guess my one final question here, Mason, is with everything, like with the technology and like what you're talking about right there, like 100% better just based off of that. What are you guys working on right now to really make the community aware of this more? Because again, I hadn't even heard of the peel pile thing. Self-admittedly, I'm never going to sit here and try and say I'm the smartest person in the room, but I had never even heard of this before. And it's like, it's the things that aren't being talked about to me because it's like, I haven't heard this on one of the mainstream things. Hey, we should do the peel pile. This is the first, but when we first talked, that was the first time I'd really heard of that.
Yeah. Well, so we're, as a company, we're trying to market this as much as we can, right? We are truckers, and we know this business. We grew up in this business, and sometimes we think of only in our narrow scope of, hey, this is our problem, we can fix this kind of thing. And then this over the last year or so, trucking has gotten so much bigger than just like what we do, right? In terms of all this. So what I would say is that we're catching up to that. We're trying to market this and get the word out the best we can, because we do think it's the right solution. And I mean, it's kind of wild to sit there and you're watching a 60-minute special. It's this national news program about a problem, and you're raising your hand saying, I know how to fix that.
I know.
That's a very wild, it's almost an out of body experience to say, like, man, I'm sure the entire country thought, man, we're totally screwed. There's nothing we're going to be able to do to get out of this. And, we're sitting back saying, this is the way forward. This is where drayage needs to go. Right. So we're trying to kick off marketing campaigns. I have never posted in LinkedIn in my entire life, except for about 9 weeks ago. And I started getting into this whole thing. So I appreciate y'all bringing me into this, because we're trying to get the word out. We want our competition to work with us. We want to work with our competition and collaborate and get the ports and the customers on the same page to show that there is a better way forward. So what we're talking about doing is potentially a drayage summit in LA in a real quick fashion, to try to get as many people as we can together to say, this is how this can work. This is how it's doing. And we can start this on the next vessel tomorrow, right? Yeah. We need to start doing this. Otherwise, we're going to continue to lose drivers. Drivers are going to quit, and there's nothing we can do to stop that. And then the next thing is that it's going to get so daggum expensive to import something in here, because we got to pay these drivers an arm and a leg to come be unproductive at the port, the ones who are going to stay. Then those guys are going to quit importing, and we're going to lose this industry if we don't do something better. And we deserve better. And I'm confident that we can do this. Yeah.
I wish I had an applause button. To throw that out. So and so anybody out there who's from mainstream media, 60 Minutes or anything like that, we have a solution. Reach out to Mason George. He's got a phenomenal solution, because again, everything that I've watched up to this point, I mean, I got to give a shout out to my buddy Brian with Port-Pocalypse, because he's coming up out there. Like, you guys are putting yourselves out there to say, like, listen, it's scary, but there's a fix here. Here's the fix, everybody. Here's the fix. This is what needs to be done. There has to be action. Again, this is the over resounding thing here is action needs to be implemented. And so, instead of the finger pointing, all that's done, that's kindergarten bullshit, in my opinion. So that has to stop. We have to work together. We have to collaborate, and we got to move forward with this. So Mason, thank you for joining me again. Everybody who's out there, I'm sorry, the comment. I'm figuring all this live stuff out as we go. I'll get better, I promise. But the recording out there will be available on the podcast, Coffee with the Freight Coach. It's on iTunes, Spotify. Check it out. Reach out to Mason to connect with him to find out more about the peels and everything else, because he's got some solutions for you. I appreciate all you guys so much for the support, and we'll talk to you guys soon.